Lesson 5, An Introduction to Japanese Verbs. Japanese verbs are very easy to spot in polite sentences. First, in polite, everyday speech, all affirmative verbs end with ma, su, mas. Some examples here. Tabemasu, tabemasu, to eat. Nomimasu, nomimasu, to drink. And ikimasu, ikimasu, to go. The second characteristic of Japanese verbs is that they always come at the end of a sentence, although the sentence final particles ka, ne, and yo that we've examined in previous lessons can also be used when following a verb. The polite forms of verbs, that is again the ones that end in mas, communicate two ideas when used in Japanese. The first is intention, that is to say, I will do this thing or I will do that thing. The second meaning communicated in Japanese when using the mas form of verbs is habitual action, that is to say, I do something on a regular basis. So how do we differentiate the meaning here? Well, let's contrast the following. Let's say your friend asks you, in Japanese of course, what are you going to do after work tonight? You reply, Watashi wa nemasu. Watashi wa nemasu. In other words, this is giving the listener the information that you intend to sleep. We'll translate that as, I will sleep. I will sleep. In our second example here, imagine your friend says to you, again in Japanese, hey, what do you usually do on weekends? You reply, Watashi wa nemasu. Watashi wa nemasu. Here we're talking about habit, expressing the habitual action. Your friend would interpret your response to mean, I usually sleep. Now, please note, these two sentences are exactly the same. It's the question, that is to say, the context, that changes the meaning here. All right, let's take a look at some usage examples of how Japanese verbs behave and look and sound in just some very simple Japanese sentences. Watashi wa okimasu. Watashi wa okimasu. Watashi wa tabemasu. Watashi wa tabemasu. Watashi wa tabemasu. Watashi wa nomimasu. Watashi wa nomimasu. Watashi wa nomimasu. Watashi wa yomimasu. Watashi wa yomimasu. Watashi wa yomimasu. So as you just saw and heard in the previous examples, the subject comes first in Japanese. In each of the previous examples, the subject was watashi, or I, followed by the verb in Japanese, which always ends the sentence. Those sentences were pretty basic. How can we go about adding objects to our sentences? Instead of just saying, I eat, how do we say, I eat sushi, I eat hamburger, whatever the case may be? In Japanese, we'll need to use a particle. This one here, o, sometimes pronounced wo, is the object marker in Japanese, and we'll need to use this particle o to mark the object of a verb. Remember that in Japanese, particles follow the words that they help or modify. In this case, our object marker o will come in between the object and the verb. Now, the word order in the sentences is going to change when we add an object to the sentence. Instead of just the subject and the verb, the object will come in between, and our object marker o will come in between the object and the verb. Don't forget, verbs always come at the end of the sentence, but they can be followed by the sentence final particles ka, the question marker, ne, the particle we use to ask for agreement or for feedback, and yo, essentially again a spoken exclamation point. Let's take a look at a few examples of more full sentences, this time including a subject, an object, and a verb. Watashi wa sushi o tabemasu. 私は寿司を食べます。私は寿司を食べます。私はお茶を飲みます。私はお茶を飲みます。私はお茶を飲みます。私は新聞を読みます。私は新聞を読みます。私は新聞を読みます。私はテレビを見ます。私はテレビを見ます。私はテレビを見ます。私はテレビゲームをします。私はテレビゲームをします。私はテレビゲームをします。It's quite a workout. Before we wrap things up, it's useful to note here again that O always follows the object in the sentence. Terebi game, in this case, and the verb shimasu. It's a bridge between the verb and the object of that verb. That is, the thing that's being acted on by the verb itself. It's also useful to note that there's no direct translation for O, at least not in this usage. The object marker O, then, is simply used to tell the listener or the reader what the target is of the verb in the sentence. To summarize, we have 3 points here. The first, remember that all affirmative polite verbs in Japanese end in these 2 syllables, ma and su. Now, not every word that ends in mas in Japanese can be said to be a verb, but we can confidently say that if it's a verb, it's in polite speech, and we're speaking affirmatively, it will definitely end in mas. We also took note of the fact that all verbs in Japanese come at the end of the sentence unless they're followed by a sentence final particle. And we took a look at the word order in Japanese sentences. Remember that that is subject, object, and verb in Japanese, while the word order in an English sentence is notably different, that is, subject, verb, and object. If we as English speakers were to let Japanese word order in a sentence dictate how we speak, we'd end up sounding a bit like Yoda from Star Wars. Recall that Yoda in the Star Wars films puts the verbs at the end of the sentence, just like the Japanese do. Japanese you speak? My apologies for my bad Yoda impression. And finally, recall that Japanese verbs in their polite, that's the mas form again, can express one of 2 things, either the intention to do something or the fact that you do some action in a habitual or repetitive way. Thanks for watching.